On a Football Friday, 1 o'clock hour is brought to us by Ferguson HVAC Lyon Conklin. Attention, you HVAC contractors. You can get your equipment, parts, and supplies for all of your heating and cooling jobs by visiting one of Ferguson's counter locations. They're in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pensacola, or Westchester. All right, let's get into the meat of the Eagles at Cincinnati. Step up in class after the last couple weeks, and it looks like a shift in the offensive direction for the Philadelphia Eagles. And to bring us the highlights and the details of that is the man who covers the Eagles for ESPN.com. In fact, wrote a story today on the Eagles finding their running game. He, of course, is the great Tim McManus. Hello, Timmy.
What's up, Mike? How you doing?
Good. All right, Tim, let's talk about this because, we've been talking about it over the last several days. Is this the way the Eagles now have to win? It's very unorthodox for them to rely on a running game and make the passing game subordinate, but it looks like it's helping Jalen Hurts.
I think it absolutely is. And not every game is going to play out that way where you have the luxury of just leaning on the running game as prominently as they did against New York last week, Mike. But we have seen a shift since they came out of the bye where they've run 81 times over 2 games, which is 10 more than the second team over that stretch. And meanwhile, Jalen Hurts' pass numbers, his attempts have gone way down, where he was averaging 38 pass attempts per game, and over the last 2 games, it's been 24. Sure, there's some extenuating circumstances there, like gaining a big lead last week, Saquon Barkley show, the whole thing. But one of the cause and effects here that we're seeing is that Hurts hasn't turned the ball over those 2 games. I think he's been a little bit more conservative, and also he's had fewer opportunities. And so the formula that has sort of developed here is that they're running more, passing less, turning the ball over less, and putting less strain on their defense. And I think that they've seen positive results across the board as a result of that. So I think absolutely they should continue with that trend.
It's interesting that in your story, you recant a conversation. So that he was asked, Nick, are we a running football team? And he says, damn right. Now, did he choke when he said damn right or what? Does he actually believe that?
Well, the caveats have flown since then, where it's like, well, it's going to depend on who we're playing and the circuit, and all that is true. Like if they get down to Cincinnati by 10, then it's going to be back to the passing game we go. But it doesn't feel coincidental to me that they come out of the bye and they're this run heavy. Like I feel like they certainly, when they're reviewing and doing their self-assessment, like what's good right now? The running game is really good right now. What's hurting us right now? Well, the defense is kind of uneven. Hurts has been turning the ball over at the second highest clip in the NFL behind only Will Levis. Like maybe we need to make some tweaks. It feels more like that than something they just stumbled upon.
All right. So I would think that the Cincinnati Bengals see all this and say, okay, well, then here's what we have to do against them, which is stop the run. And, eventually, and it was brought up this week, eventually the quarterback's going to have to beat somebody if they shut down that running game. Now, the progress of Jalen Hurts, you follow it every day. His completion rate is a little higher than his career average. He's in the top 5 in QBR, completion percentage, and off-target rate, while operating inside the pocket. But he's throwing it outside the pocket just 18%. So what do we make of Jalen Hurts right now?
Yeah, I would say still a work in progress in this system and a little bit too much of a boom-bust factor. And there was the boom over the last 2 weeks, like where they took the shots downfield against Cleveland late and then on the 4th down situation against the Giants last week, and it both paid off. But we've also seen sort of the other side to that. So it just feels like overall Hurts in the passing game has been a little bit too erratic. I agree with you, Mike, that Cincinnati has to be looking at the formula that the Eagles are using and think like, hey, let's see if we can shut down Saquon and make Hurts be a little bit more consistent and beat us that way. The good thing, obviously, that the Eagles have going for them is they have 2 of the best wide receivers in the game. And if you look at the Bengals secondary, it's not that great, right? So there's almost like a point like, does Sirianni and Kellen Moore get lured into this idea anyway of, you know what, I really like our matchups on the outside. Let's try to exploit that. That's something that they're going to have to strike a nice balance of. But, yeah, if Cincinnati loads up, then obviously it's going to fall more on the shoulders of Hurts. and he's got to rise to it.
Yeah, and the Bengals only allowed 77 yards on the ground last week. So, all right, let's look at the other side of it, because Joe Burrow's the guy who gets rid of the ball quickly. He's kind of hot right now. The secondary of the Eagles held Daniel Jones to less than 100 yards last night. They got pressure on the quarterback, but it's going to be tougher to get pressure on Burrow. But here's a number that sticks out to me. They have a 99.0 rating to wide receivers this year, which is 22nd in the league. Now, we think the secondary is improved, but that number would belie that.
Yeah, but here's something that I found really instructive when thinking about this defense. So this morning, I was reading my colleague over at ESPN who covers the Bengals, Ben Baby, and his piece this week was on how the defense has turned a corner for Cincinnati. And what he was citing was the fact over the last 2 weeks they haven't allowed 14 points or more. But the opponents that they were playing over the last 2 weeks were the exact two opponents that the Eagles played the last 2 weeks, and the Browns and the Giants. And so that offers the perspective of like, all right, yes, the defense looks better, but, is it fully there? Can we believe everything that we've seen with our eyes the last 2 weeks? So this is a great opportunity for them to be very, very decided in where that's going. If they can find a way to get after Burrow, who, is a fast processor and decision maker, if they can slow down two of the best wide receivers in the game, or at least one of the best tandems, Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in the game for sure, that's going to say a lot about Quinion Mitchell. It's going to say a lot about Vic Fangio, and it's going to say a lot about how the whole defense is coalescing if they can put up similar performance against what's a pretty potent Cincinnati attack.
Tim, I'm still shocked as when you watch this offense for the Philadelphia Eagles, they haven't looked like they've been firing on all cylinders yet this year, but somehow they lead the NFL with 10 plays of 40 or more yards, which is more than they had all of last season. So when you look at that, who should get the credit? Is it the players, or should we give credit to Kellen Moore for designing plays that turn into these explosive plays that they always talk about?
I mean, some of it's the fact that they're getting it from the ground game, which is kind of crazy, Bill. I mean, Saquon already has 3 rushes just in the last 4 games of 55-plus yards, and 0 running back had 3 plays of 55-plus yards the entire season last year. So it just kind of puts into perspective what you're getting out of the run game right now. It's not like your typical, well, if you're running the ball, then it's all going to be ball control, and it's going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Like, no, he's busting off some really explosive plays. And then in the running game, it sort of speaks, I think, more to that boom-bust nature that we're talking about, that Hurts has been pretty dynamite with the deep ball. That's one thing that you can't knock him for. The connection has definitely been there with A.J. Brown in particular. So I think that's what you're saying is like a mixture of the explosive plays on the ground and the fact that, the Eagles really like to push the ball downfield. And it was a question that was presented to Hurts this week of like, are you guys a little bit over-reliant on that deep ball? And what he said I thought was pretty telling. He said, basically, that's also a big part of our identity, and people have to get used to it.
All right. Now, Tim, the analytics say this is a really important game as far as the playoffs go. I was reading a number that if the Eagles win, that makes them 5-2, and at 5-2, there are a 74.9% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose, it drops down to 50. Your thoughts?
Well, maybe it speaks to the part, like this sticks in my mind, Mike, is like they might have to win the division in order to get in. And I say that specifically because when I look at what's happening over at the NFC North, like they might occupy all those wild card spots if it keeps up this way. And so it becomes very important to keep pace with the Commanders. And as we sort of project ahead, the 2 games against Washington might end up being absolutely huge. But I think we can also feel it almost from like a psychology standpoint here. If they were to beat the Bengals on the road, it'd be the first time that they ever recorded a win in Cincinnati, then you're sitting there and saying, you know what, this team's probably going to be 6-2 because they got the Jags the next week, and that puts them in a very strong position in the NFC. The other side of it is if they end up going to Cincinnati and get worked, or if they lose this game and then the old things come back. Why isn't Jalen Hurts playing up the way he is? What's going on? Nick Sirianni screwed this up. 4-3, and those 2 wins were against 2 also-ran teams. So we can kind of see where the storylines would generate on both sides. And so I feel like, from a playoff positioning standpoint, from a psychological perspective, if they can go into Cincinnati and get a win, I think that would be a big thing for them.
Yeah, and of course, that factoid, the first win in Cincinnati, was emphasized today by Merrill Reese.
It sure was. And
How
Nick,
about that?
Nick said whether you're on the radio or asking a question, your voice is beautiful. It's great.
All right, Timmy. So here it is. You have a good feel for these results. What are you feeling about this one?
So I'm picking the Bengals in this one. I do feel like it's going to be a close one. The one thing that I have kind of on my mind going into this one is the last time they had an emotional win was in New Orleans, where it seemed like they sort of emptied their bucket a little bit, and they played Tampa the next week, and they didn't even show up. And so I'm wondering, like, coming off of the Saquon revenge game where they pitched this almost perfect game, do they rise to the occasion in the following week against what's going to be obviously a superior opponent? And so there's a chance, and I think that would answer a lot of questions if they do. But I'm gonna pick Cincinnati in a close one.
All right, sounds good. I think I feel the same way. So we'll see how it turns out. Tim, always a pleasure to speak with you on Football Friday. Have fun in Cincy.
Always my pleasure, guys.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
All right.